It's no secret that an increasing number of people across the UK are experiencing homelessness. We have a perspective sometimes as to what causes homelessness, but really the pressures on the housing market, stagnating wages, an increase in shortfall between housing benefits and income, mental health challenges, substance misuse and dual diagnosis are all contributory and interrelated factors. Very often when we think of homelessness, we think of rough sleepers, those we see in the doorways of Belfast. But indeed, the majority of people who are homeless are hidden. They are those who are living with families, living in inappropriate accommodation, accommodation that's deteriorating or no longer fit for purpose. However, at the Welcome organisation, we work with those who experience homelessness in its most critical form. That is, those who are rough sleeping, those who have nowhere to call home, and those who are deemed as chronic homeless, those who are vulnerable and have presented maybe at least 3 times in the last year to services as being homeless. Homelessness is something that can affect us all. I'm going to show you a brief video based on the true life experiences of, we'll call him Richard, one of our clients, who started off very successfully, owned 3 businesses. When the recession came, he was in food and bar industry. When the recession came, he said it was as if people just stopped coming out. He eventually lost all of his businesses and subsequently his wife and family. We picked him up on the streets of Belfast, absolutely desperate, didn't know where to turn, and indeed, you can see, follow him through his journey, and I'll come back in a moment. 1 in 18 people in Northern Ireland will experience homelessness in their lifetime. During 2018-19, 1,800 people presented as homeless to the Housing Executive. If you can imagine that, sometimes I think it's better to visualise your pink glider buses. That's 182 glider buses full of people presenting annually as homeless. There's a cycle of factors, as we heard from Richard: unemployment, debt, poverty, relationship breakdown, and history. It is well documented that a child who is homeless, experiences homelessness, is more likely to become homeless as an adult. Homelessness is not just a housing issue. It's difficult to address in isolation. If you can imagine living in overcrowded conditions, poor housing, or indeed living with debt day and daily, the knock-on effect, relationships start to fragment. Very often it's the man who leaves the home. Your mental health and your physical health starts to suffer and becomes problematic. Many of the people who we deal with live in very dangerous conditions. They have very unhealthy lifestyles. 77% smoke, 35% don't have 2 meals a day, and at least 66%, and I would say that's a conservative issue, consume more than the recommended amount of alcohol. And increasingly, the use of substances is a significant problem among the homelessness population. What is the impact on health services? While we have very high levels of GP registration, keeping people in service and connected is very, very difficult. Health services do not necessarily have the resources to keep people connected, so it falls to organisations like ourselves. Subsequently, people do not necessarily receive the help that they need when they need it. They're more likely to present to A&E when their health is in crisis and at its worst. Anyone who works in Belfast will tell you that the use of acute services by homeless people, it's very, very significant. And indeed, someone who is homeless is 4 times more likely to use A&E than the general population. And indeed, many of the people who present And I'm talking probably just about those who are at the cold face of homelessness, not those who remain stable within family homes or whatever, or sharing. But the ones that we work with, they take up the most resources in terms of health. What we are doing, we're Belfast-centric. We work very closely with Belfast Trust. We support about 1,300 individuals every year across 4 services, and each service is interlinked. We deliver street outreach. At the moment, during the winter, we're on the street 24 hours every day, 365 a year. We have a drop-in service, which is attended by at least 70 individuals a day. We have crisis accommodation for women. And again, these would be women with very, very complex issues and women who ricochet around the system. But we do have successes, and we do get people accommodated. So subsequently, we support 100 individuals in the community, those who would be hanging on by a thread. And we support them to keep their accommodation, remain linked into services, be that health, benefits, housing, or whatever. And that is a very, very critical element of what we do. Our client profile, as I said, we work at the cold face. It's primarily rough sleepers. Those who are marginally accommodated, the 100 people in the community who really do not, a lot of them do not have the capacity. They've never had to budget. They are now living on very, very reduced benefits. So day-to-day living is very, very difficult. Never mind remember to attend an appointment at A&E or your GP or whatever. These are people who are primarily marginalised, excluded from other services. Those who have gone to DHSS, their behaviour has been so bad they've been excluded, don't come back, have gone to the housing executive. Behaviour has been so erratic due to their mental health, their substance misuse or whatever, don't come back. Those who are at risk of repeat homelessness, the chronic homeless. I mean, within our Women's Project, we had 37 women represented last year, and indeed, some of those women, we had moved on, as we thought, to longer-term accommodation, and the majority returned more than 7 times within 1 year. Chronic homeless, those who are very vulnerable, those who presented as homeless at least 3 times in the last year. We need to break that cycle. Chaotic lifestyles related to peer pressure, drugs, alcohol, behaviours associated with mental health, substance misuse, and dual diagnosis are real issues for us. As you can imagine, you're homeless, you start to self-medicate with the painkillers, etc. This is a gateway then. You don't get the same kick, you move on, and then before you know it, we have people using heroin and other opioids. It is a real and growing issue within Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, we need to revisit the gateways into services. The people we work with, every one of them has faced a trauma. Their mental health has deteriorated. If we had the services to get people detoxed, to get them clean, we need to have the mental health services to provide the alternative to address that trauma, to stop the self-medication. What makes Welcome different? Lots of homelessness agencies out there. We're extremely low threshold and extremely, exceptionally high tolerance. Everything we do is based on the principles of harm reduction. We provide free meals, free clothes, showers, laundry, etc. at no cost to clients, which is unique also. We are very much of the mind that people will use their income to chase and the next fix or whatever. So food, looking, self-care, etc. is not a priority. Our ethos is meeting people where they are at. We're very non-judgmental and really little short of committing a heinous crime. We do keep you in services, and if we give you time out from one service, we're quite happy that we have a continuum of other services to pick up the pieces. For us, and for those who come to us, it is their last chance saloon. A lot of people have been excluded from other services. And I know it's probably not PC, but sometimes it does feel like the insane asylum. If you can imagine what it's like, you know what it's like. Frontline services, A&E, someone comes in under the influence, mental health, substance, under the influence of substance. If you can imagine what it's like day and daily, having at least 10, 15, 20 people in a drop-in, being managed by people who are very well skinned, but are skinned, need to be thick-skinned, very well skilled, but not professionally trained. We need to tackle the issues together. We need collectively to invest in earlier interventions. We need to invest in community mental health. There's a real gap there. And we need to revisit the pathways and the gateways for the improved care of people with co-occurring mental health issues and substance misuse. I mean, realistically, is someone going to stay clean for 3 months to get into a mental health or a treatment service? The people we work with, it's really not a realistic achievement. And primary care services need to be more targeted to the specific needs of homeless patients. And housing and health need to be joined up as part of the same pathway. We need a clear set of actions. We need to revisit the legislation. We need to revisit the housing order, which says that other agencies will support the housing executive to meet their statutory duty. It's not good enough to just say that there's an obligation. It needs to be in statute, particularly when homelessness is competing with homelessness health, is competing with so many other issues. Some of the things I think we can do, and I know at ministerial level there are talks going on as to how housing, health, education, benefits can work better together, but we do need health at the table. And we need practitioners, those who know what's going on the ground, the challenges that are faced day and daily. We need to be pragmatic. I'm very mindful that the Minister, I'm kind of geeing things up so that the Minister gets on to speak. But I would want to say to you that we recognise how difficult it is out there for nurses and how frustrating it can be when people ricochet around the system and use up what some people deem as priority resources. Indeed, recently we had an incident in the community and an ambulance attended our drop-in. Meantime, someone up the street had had a heart attack and one of the neighbours phoned to say, we cannot get an ambulance here for the next, they say it'll be an hour at least before we can get an ambulance here. But meantime, you have an ambulance sitting at your drop-in centre, tending to someone. Now that said an awful lot to me. Is the health of a homeless person not as valuable as that who is someone who's living in a settled community? Charlotte stole some of my lines. It's not acceptable. It is an affront to social justice that women and men are dying way before their time. I mean, 42-year-old women die due to homelessness. That's worse than the Republic of Congo. It's an affront to social justice in the Western world. And thank you very much for the invitation. And I wish you all very well. Wish you all well in the next year ahead. And fantastic to hear about some of the programmes. And look forward to hopefully working with Health in the future to see what we can do to tackle this issue together. Thank you.